After 7 years in the market, I realized something uncomfortable. Most traders don't lose because their strategy is bad. They lose because they are trying to be certain. They want the perfect entry, the perfect confirmation, the perfect signal that tells them, this trade will work. But the market doesn't work like that. The moment you start trading seriously, you discover something strange. Even a good trade can lose, and even a terrible trade can win. If you cannot accept that reality, you will spend years searching for something that doesn't exist, certainty. And that search quietly destroys traders, because trading is not about predicting correctly. It's about thinking probabilistically. There is a moment in every trader's journey where something changes. Not the strategy, not the indicators. The way you see trades changes. A trade stops being a judgment about you. It stops being proof that you are improving, or proof that you are failing. Instead, it becomes something much simpler. Just one sample in a long statistical sequence. When that shift happens, something inside you relaxes. You stop fighting every loss. You stop celebrating every win. You stop trying to prove something to the market. You just execute. That was the real turning point in my trading. Not the strategy, not the win rate. The moment I finally understood that a single trade means almost nothing. When traders start, they see every trade as a story. A losing trade means, I made a mistake. Winning trade means, I'm getting better. And slowly, without realizing it, their identity becomes tied to the outcome of each trade. That's where emotional chaos begins, because markets are not designed to validate you. They are designed around probability, and probability does not care about your expectations. A perfect setup can fail. A weak setup can succeed. If you interpret each outcome personally, trading becomes psychologically unbearable. Thinking probabilistically is not a small adjustment. It's a complete shift in how your brain interprets trading. You stop asking, will this trade work? And start asking, over the next 100 trades, does my edge produce positive expectancy? That question changes everything, because it removes pressure from the individual trade and moves it to the series. The series is where truth exists, not in the moment. Imagine 100 trades laid out in a row. Some will win, some will lose, some will surprise you, some will frustrate you. But the value of your system is not determined by trade number 7 or trade number 43. It's determined by the entire sequence. Most traders emotionally react to every bead on the string, but profitable traders look at the entire chain. The hardest part about probabilistic thinking is this: your brain is not built for it. Humans evolved to search for meaning, patterns, stories, closure. We want every event to make sense. But markets are messy. They are noisy. They contain randomness. So the real challenge of trading is not learning charts. It's learning to operate inside uncertainty without losing psychological stability. When this mindset truly clicks, 3 things begin to change. First, you stop judging yourself based on single trades. Second, you start designing systems with positive expectancy. Third, you manage risk so variance cannot destroy you emotionally or financially. These 3 shifts sound simple, but living them is where most traders fail. Let's break them down. Part 1. Stop measuring yourself by single trades. The first shift is deceptively simple. Stop measuring your success by single trades. But in reality, this is one of the hardest things a trader will ever learn. Because when you start trading, every trade feels like a verdict. If the trade wins, you feel competent. If the trade loses, you feel like you made a mistake. And slowly, without noticing, your emotional state becomes synchronized with your P and L. Green day, you feel confident. Red day, you feel uncertain. And that's where instability begins. In my early years trading, every trade mattered too much. If I had 3 losses in a row, I started questioning everything. Maybe the strategy stopped working. Maybe I misread the market. Maybe I wasn't improving at all. And when I had a big winning trade, the opposite happened. Confidence exploded. Suddenly I felt like I understood the market. I would increase size, take more trades, trust my instincts more. Looking back, the problem wasn't the strategy. The problem was that I was emotionally reacting to noise. Here is something most traders intellectually understand but emotionally reject. A perfect trade can lose, and a terrible trade can win. This happens every day in the market. But when traders experience it personally, they struggle to accept it, because they are looking for a direct connection between skill to outcome. In most professions, that connection exists. If a surgeon performs well, the patient improves. If an engineer builds correctly, the bridge stands. But in trading, the connection between skill and outcome is delayed. You can execute perfectly and still lose. And if you interpret that loss emotionally, you begin to sabotage yourself. The human brain is not built for probabilistic environments. We evolved to interpret immediate feedback. If something hurts, avoid it. If something works, repeat it. But markets don't provide that kind of clean feedback. Instead, they produce sequences like this: win, loss, loss, win, loss, win, win, loss. To the brain, that sequence looks chaotic, so it tries to impose meaning. This setup stopped working. This market is manipulated. I should change strategy, but often nothing changed. You're just experiencing variance. One of the most important habits I developed was this: I stopped evaluating individual trades. Instead, I evaluated trade series: 20 trades, 50 trades, 100 trades. Only then did I judge whether the system was working. That shift removed enormous psychological pressure. Because once you think in series, one losing trade becomes insignificant. It's just one data point, not a verdict. When traders start thinking probabilistically, their behavior changes in subtle ways. They don't panic after 2 losses. They don't feel invincible after 2 wins. They stop trying to interpret every market movement, and instead, they focus on execution quality. Did the setup match the rules? Was the risk correct? Did I follow the plan? If the answer is yes, the trade is considered successful, regardless of outcome. That mindset takes time to build, but once it forms, trading becomes dramatically more stable. When you finally internalize this idea, something interesting happens. Trading becomes quieter, less dramatic, less emotional. You stop chasing redemption after losses. You stop celebrating wins like breakthroughs. You just execute. And ironically, that emotional neutrality is what allows consistency to appear. Not because the market changed, but because your relationship with outcomes change. But understanding probability alone is not enough, because even if you stop judging trades individually, one critical question remains: does your system actually have an edge? That brings us to the second shift. You must design a system with positive expectancy. Because without positive expectancy, probabilistic thinking simply means losing money, slowly. Let's talk about part 2. Build a system with positive expectancy. Once you stop judging trades one by one, another uncomfortable question appears. Does your system actually have an edge? Because probabilistic thinking only works if the probabilities are in your favor. Otherwise, you are just flipping coins with discipline. And discipline alone cannot save a negative system. Most traders don't design systems. They collect concepts. They learn ICT, Elliott wave, Wyckoff, smart money, indicators, order blocks. And each concept seems convincing on a chart. But very few traders ever ask the most important question: what is the expectancy of this strategy? Not how beautiful the setup looks, not how convincing the explanation sounds, but mathematically, does this system make money over a large number of trades? There was a period where I thought I had found an amazing setup. The charts looked perfect, the logic was clear, and when it worked, the trades looked incredible. But when I finally went back and reviewed the data, something surprising appeared. The win rate was high, but the losses were much larger than the wins. Over time, the system slowly lost money. That was a painful realization, because it forced me to accept something most traders avoid. A strategy that looks good can still be mathematically flawed. Expectancy is simple. Expectancy equal win rate multiply average win minus loss rate multiply average loss. That single formula tells you everything. If the result is positive, the system has an edge. If the result is negative, no amount of discipline will save it. One of the most interesting things about trading is this: a system can win only 40% of the time and still be profitable. If the average winner is large enough. For example, 40% wins, 60% losses, but winners are 3 times larger than losers. That system can produce consistent long-term profits. On the other hand, a system can win 80% of the time and still lose money, if the losses are much larger than the wins. This is why many traders feel confused. They see many winning trades, but the account slowly declines, because the math underneath is broken. Once you understand expectancy, your focus shifts. You stop asking, is this trade going to win? Instead you ask, does this trade belong to my positive expectancy system? If the answer is yes, you take it. If the answer is no, you ignore it. It doesn't matter how attractive it looks. That shift simplifies trading dramatically. Because now you are not trying to predict the market. You are simply executing a statistical edge. The difficult part is this: even profitable systems lose frequently. Sometimes 5 trades in a row. Sometimes 10. If you don't understand expectancy, those streaks will break your confidence. You'll change the system, or start experimenting, or abandon the method entirely. And ironically, you will quit right before the statistical edge reappears. That is why probabilistic thinking and expectancy must exist together. One without the other creates instability. A real edge is not glamorous. It does not win every day. It does not look impressive on social media. But over a long sequence of trades, the math slowly works in your favor. Small gains accumulate. Losses stay controlled. and the equity curve rises gradually. Not explosively, but consistently. Now we reach the third shift. Even if you have a system with positive expectancy, you can still fail, because the biggest enemy of probabilistic systems is variance. And if your risk is too large, variance can destroy you before your edge has time to work. So the final piece of probabilistic thinking is this: risk management. How you size your trades determines whether you survive long enough for the probabilities to play out. Let's talk about how to manage risk so variance cannot destroy you. Even if you understand probability, even if your system has positive expectancy, you can still lose everything, because probabilistic systems have one unavoidable property: variance. Variance is the reason profitable traders still experience losing streaks. And if your risk is too large, variance will destroy you before your edge has time to work. Many traders believe losses mean something is wrong. Sometimes that is true, but often, losses are simply part of the statistical distribution. A strategy with a positive expectancy can still produce sequences like this: loss and loss and loss, then win, then loss again, and loss again, then win. If you only look at the short-term sequence, it feels like the strategy is broken. But when you zoom out across 100 trades, the edge becomes visible. The problem is that many traders never reach trade number 100 because they sized too aggressively. Variance eliminated them first. Early in my trading journey, I underestimated this completely. I thought if the setup was strong, it deserved larger size. When the market aligned with my analysis, I increased risk, and sometimes it worked beautifully. But eventually, a losing streak appeared. Not because the system stopped working, but because variance always appears in probabilistic systems. And when it did, the drawdown was much larger than expected. That was when I realized something important. Risk management is not about maximizing profit. It is about surviving long enough for your edge to play out. If you look at professional traders, their risk per trade often seems surprisingly small. Many risk 0.25%, 0.5, 1%. At first, that feels frustrating, because the profits seem slow. But the purpose of small risk is not speed. It is stability. Small risk compresses the impact of variance, which means losing streaks become psychologically manageable. And psychological stability is what allows consistent execution. Most traders think risk management protects their capital. In reality, it protects something more important: your ability to keep thinking clearly. Large losses create emotional pressure. Emotional pressure creates impulsive decisions. Impulsive decisions destroy systems. So risk management protects the one thing probabilistic trading requires: consistency of execution. Once you combine the three shifts, something interesting happens. You stop reacting to every trade. You stop chasing perfect predictions. You stop feeling pressure to win immediately. Instead, trading becomes a long experiment. You execute your edge, you manage risk carefully, and you allow the probabilities to unfold over time. This is what most traders never experience, because they are always trying to accelerate the process. But probabilistic systems reward patience, not urgency. When traders finally internalize probabilistic thinking, their behavior changes. They stop chasing trades. They stop interpreting every loss personally. They stop adjusting systems impulsively. And they begin to think like statisticians instead of gamblers. Not because they became smarter, but because they accepted uncertainty. So, when people ask me what the real turning point in trading is, it's not discovering a secret strategy. It's not finding the perfect indicator. It's learning to think probabilistically. Because once you do that, the entire game changes. Let's close with what this mindset actually means in practice. After enough time in the market, you start to see trading differently. Not as a battle, not as a prediction game, but as a long experiment. Each trade is just one observation, one small sample inside a much larger statistical story. And when you truly understand that, something inside you becomes quieter. You stop needing every trade to prove something. You stop trying to be right all the time. You stop searching for certainty in a place where certainty does not exist. Instead, you begin focusing on the only things that actually matter. A system with positive expectancy, risk small enough to survive variance, and the discipline to execute the same process repeatedly. Day after day, trade after trade. The turning point in trading rarely looks dramatic. It's not a huge win. It's not a perfect setup. It's the moment when your mindset changes. When you stop thinking like a gambler looking for the next big trade and start thinking like a scientist running a long experiment. You stop asking, will this trade work? And start asking, does this trade belong to my system? Because if it does, the outcome of this one trade doesn't matter. The series does. Most traders never reach that point. They keep searching for certainty. They keep chasing new strategy. They keep trying to eliminate losses. But losses are not the problem. Misunderstanding probability is markets are uncertain by nature. The only rational response is to build a system that can survive uncertainty, to think in probabilities, to respect risk, and to give your edge enough time to work. If you can do that consistently, something remarkable happens. Trading becomes calmer, decisions become clearer, and over time, the quiet mathematics of probability begins to work in your favor. So if you remember only one sentence from this entire video, let it be this: a single trade means almost nothing, but a well-executed series of trades can change everything. Think in probabilities, respect the process, and give the math time to work. That is the real turning point.